Hello again, my name's Daniel and welcome back to my channel. Guilty feet have got no rhythm. Foreshadowing. Today, the day after this year's Oscar nominations were announced, I thought I would do an Oscar-themed video. I know there are at least of two other booktubers who are big Oscar fans. Greg at Supposedly Fun is a massive fan of movies and the Oscars, and Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse is an Oscars expert. If you haven't been watching, he does, as well as all his book videos, he's about halfway through a series running down the top 100 movies of the 21st century, and we're eagerly awaiting the next round of those. And he is also a self-confessed Oscars fanatic, and he put up earlier this week, he put up his predictions for the nominations which were announced yesterday, and he was, I would say, about 85% accurate. So he's pretty much an expert on these things. So check out both of those channels, and I'll link to them below. What I went to look at my books, and I wanted to see how many books I had that were written by people who'd won Oscars. I want to be clear, these are not books on which Oscar-winning movies were based, not that. These are actual books written by people who have won a statue. And I've got quite a nice range here. Some obvious ones, some writers. I've got a couple of directors, some musicians, a producer, and even one actor. So I've got 10 here and then 3 bonus books. So bear with me. It's basically just an excuse to talk about books, of course, as always. But if any of you have more or other books that have been written by people who have won Oscars, I would love to hear about it. We have about a month until the Oscars are given out. This is not a tag, not a challenge, but if you have books written by people who won Oscars, let us know. Okay, first up, kind of an obvious one, perhaps, very widely read and a terrific book in its own right. This is Adventures in Screen Trade by William Goldman. Goldman has won 2 Oscars, so we're off to a flying start. He won his first Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for writing Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and he won a Best Adapted Screenplay for All the President's Men, thank you, based on Woodward or Bernstein's, one of them. I don't think they wrote it together, but one of them wrote the book that he read. Anyway, Best Adapted Screenplay. This is his book, Adventures in the Screen Trade, where he talks about his life as a jobbing Hollywood screenwriter. He gives terrific anecdote. He's really juicy, really gossipy, and there's also sort of some practical advice in here as well. So he shows examples of screenplays that he's written and how to get to a certain point, and how it's if you have any interest in movies and interested in the craft of screenwriting, he's fun and gets his hands dirty, and he wrote this thinking that he'd never get employed again, but somehow his craft won through and he carried on writing, and I think we only lost him a couple of years ago. I have a follow-up. There's a follow-up volume to this called Which Lie Did I Tell?, which I've also got and read. Absolutely terrific. So if you have a love of screenwriting and the craft of it, and then old school sort of 70s Hollywood, William Goldman is a man. That's number 1. Let me find somewhere to put all these books. I'll bring my chair closer. Sorry about this. Number 2, I have another screenwriter, and this is the playwright Peter Schaffer. So Peter Schaffer won for his adapted screenplay of Amadeus. A fine movie if you haven't seen it, and he adapted it from his own play. This is an earlier play of his that I first read in school, where it gave me the willies, and bought this because I had sort of weird memories of it, and so I picked this up like last year and read it again, and a tremendously powerful book about youth and sexuality and faith and the links between sexuality and faith, and it's absolutely terrific. They made a movie of this as well, with Richard Burton playing the older psychiatrist character, and a young Peter Firth playing Alan Strang. But this is a terrific play, Equus, and interesting. Peter Schaffer was the identical twin brother of Anthony Schaffer, who was also a playwright and famously wrote Sleuth, which has been made at least twice into movies. I think Anthony Schaffer adapted the first one of my all-time favourite movies with Laurence Olivier and Michael Caine. But this is Peter Schaffer, Equus, won an Oscar. Peter Schaffer won an Oscar for his adapted screenplay for Amadeus. Up next, another playwright, the last playwright I have here, and this is Tom Stoppard with his classic work Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Dead. Tom Stoppard won a best screenplay, there must have been an original screenplay, Oscar for, I think he won it joint for Shakespeare in Love. So this is, I think, one of his earliest works, if not his first produced play. I might not have got that right. And Stoppard's still with us, and there was just this year, I think, a huge, giant biography of Stoppard published that I'd love to get my hands on, but at the moment it's best part of £30, and I may wait a little bit and see if I can pick it up a year from now. I sort of came to Stoppard, I guess, in the 80s. So this was a hit, and we were talking. This would be studied in school alongside Hamlet. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are characters in Hamlet, if you're unaware. I saw, I guess at that sort of period of his new work, I saw in the theatre a play called Hapgood, which was sort of a spy, wordy, classic Stoppard, I think, with Felicity Kendall. And then I saw Arcadia in London on its first run. And I've sort of tried to keep up with him, and occasionally, I think I've read a couple of them, but this is the only one I actually own. So I'm not sure where I read them. I think maybe in school we did Jumpers, is that right? Or The Real Inspector Hound? I think a couple of old Stoppard. Anyway, Tom Stoppard, this is the last playwright I have on my list, writer and Oscar winner. And then the last sort of one, who I guess is known as an actual writer, apart from one of the bonuses, is John Irving. John Irving doesn't get talked about much, I don't think, on BookTube. I don't see a lot of people talking about him, and he's fallen a bit out of fashion. But if you are unfamiliar with his work, then I urge you to go back and pick up, I'd say, two key novels by John Irving, which, if you have any kind of love for big American novels, should be on your reading list. I don't know whether he's just fallen out of favour, or sort of white male American authors are in general sort of out of favour. But this. A Prayer for Untitled is an absolutely outstanding book. One of the great openings, people talk about DeLillo, and Mark Nash was talking rightly about DeLillo's opening for Underworld and other books of his that have great openings. Prayer for Untitled has one of the great opening scenes in literature. And then the earlier work of his, which really demands attention, is, of course, The World According to Garp, which perhaps reputation diminished slightly by the movie, which was ho-hum, for which John Lithgow, I think, was nominated for an Oscar for his role in that movie, playing a trans character. But the original book, The World According to Garp, is one of the great finds and the great milestones on my journey as a reader. I think I must have been 18, 19 years old when I read it, and there's a novel within a novel, and just fine writing, funny but also downbeat. My brother's a massive John Irving fan. So I read Garp and Untitled and one more, but I haven't read Cider-House Rules, which is supposed to be a fabulous book, but I have seen and loved the movie, and that was the movie for which John Irving won a Best Adapted Screenplay. He adapted his own novel and won an Oscar for it, John Irving. Okay, so we finished with the pure writers now, and a couple of books by directors, or Oscar-winning directors that made the books. One of them we've seen already, and this is my copy of Getting Away with It by Steven Soderbergh, where he has that great face on the cover, and it's his interviews with Richard Lester. It's a terrific read. I think this will grow in stature as Soderbergh, I think he's on his third or fourth retirement by now, but he keeps coming back and making more movies, and he's just such to my mind, a key figure in modern cinema in America, starting with Sex, Lies and Videotape, for which he was nominated for a screenplay, and then up through his, his Annus Mirabilis, where he was nominated twice in 1 year as Best Director for Erin Brockovich, and Traffic, for which he won his first and to date only Oscar. So that's Steven Soderbergh. Here's another director, producer, not quite sure which, joint both, one of the Coen brothers, Joel and Ethan, and Ethan is the one not married to Frances McDormand, if that makes any sense to you. And early on in their career, they were, the story is, I think they always co-produce and co-direct the movies, but early on, just in order so that people understood what was going on, one of them would be listed as director. I think Joel, and Ethan would be listed as the producer, but the screenplays would be ascribed to both of them. I think as their careers have gone on, I think they have been listed as both, winning Oscars for the screenplay for come back to that. Screenplay for Fargo. I think they won the screenplay Oscar, and Best Director and Best Producer, actually, because they won Best Film. So there's not a Best Producer award. Sorry, the Best Film award goes to the producers for No Country for Old Men, was their big hit. And this is a set of short stories by Ethan Coen, which didn't make a great impression. I bought this 20 years ago, 2000. This is listed. That little £4 tells me I bought it in my beloved 2J's in Edgware, and it didn't leave a big impression on me, these short stories. And I have a couple of their screenplays, which I think I've shown before on the channel, including Miller's Crossing. But I don't remember much about these, but I have Gates of Eden by Ethan Coen. One more director, and this is an odd one, because he's a director, but I believe he won an Oscar for his screenplay. Okay, so perhaps I should have included these with the screenplays. Anyway, this is Neil Jordan's Night in Tunisia. So as director, he's known for Mona Lisa, was one of his early breakout hits, and certainly in the UK, I think it was co-produced by Channel 4 and was a big 80s movie that used to show up on TV on Channel 4, funnily enough, fairly often after that. And then his I think his biggest hit, probably at the box office, was, of course, and I can't remember, the Crime Game. Thank you. My God, my brain is getting old. So he directed The Crime Game and wrote the screenplay, for which he won an Oscar. And this is a set of short stories that he published long before then. So this is originally published in 1976 by the Irish Writers Cooperative in Dublin. And I bought this secondhand. I can see there, I paid £1.95. Now has a cover price of £3.50. I bought this in some kind of sale. I was in Hampstead, and if you know Hampstead in London, and there was some kind of, I don't know what it was. I walked in off the street, and they had a whole tables full of books for sale, and I picked this up. And it's very, very brief and lightweight short stories, and it's got his, I think, a lot of sort of traditional Jordan obsessions with religion, amongst other things, but not the exclusion of everything else. But again, it's kind of lost in time to me. This is bought in 95, so it's 26 years since I read it, and I don't remember much about it, and apologies for that. But if I'm talking about books by people who have won Oscars, then Neil Jordan fits right in. Okay, so we're done with writers and directors. Let's see what else we've got. We have here, this is a great big autobiography by an Oscar winner, not as a writer or an actor or as a producer, but as a musician. This is Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, a big Springsteen fan. So I, like a lot of people, first came across Springsteen with his Born in the USA album, so circa 84, 85, when he was having hits on the charts, and Born in the USA and I'm on Fire, Dancing in the Dark, of course, was with the Corny Cox video, was the big breakout, at least for me, in the UK. And then he played Wembley Stadium, I think that's summer, early 1985, and my sister, I remember, got a job So in 85, I'm 16, so she must have been 18, and she got a job as a steward at Wembley Stadium for the Bruce Springsteen concerts. And she brought home for me a Bruce Springsteen Born in the USA T-shirt. So even though I wasn't actually that big a fan of Bruce Springsteen, there are pictures of me that summer. I would have been, after my O-levels, I think I was in Israel that summer on tour, and there's pictures of me wearing my Bruce Springsteen T-shirt, but never really, I don't think I've ever bought a Bruce Springsteen album, but occasionally, I would listen to it and I understand the man's impact. His most famous record is called Born to Run, and I was never that big fan of either the album or the song itself. I would perhaps sacrilegiously suggest that Frankie Goes to Hollywood's cover version of Born to Run on their album, on their first and probably, well, not only, but the first and the only one worth listening to album, their cover of Born to Run, I think, is better than Springsteen's original. But I came to this because it had great reviews. And actually it's a terrific read. He's very honest, very candid. He talks about his goals as a musician and how he always wanted to give good value. And he became known for the length of his concerts and for being one of the hardest working men in showbiz. But he talks very clearly about how it was always his intention to give more and provide value. The people that come out and pay to see him, whether it's in a tiny little club at the start of his career, or whether it's in Rio in front of 100,000 people. I could be making that bit up. But whatever the size of his concert, he always planned to give more and to entertain, and took his role as an entertainer, I think, more seriously than we hear about other musicians who it's all about the colour of the M&Ms that they have on their rider. Very clear on his mental health as well, and the toll of touring, and the toll on his relationships and his shyness, and talks about lengthy periods of several months where he was unable to get out of bed, and just a terrific reflective work of autobiography. Springsteen, bring it back to the Oscars, Springsteen won an Oscar for his song Streets of Philadelphia for the movie Philadelphia in, when's that, 94-ish, somewhere around there. Great read if you have any love for rock star biographies. Foreshadowing. This is a terrific example. I have this great hardback, which I must have picked up at some point in 2016. But really good. And I've lent this to a few people who have all been struck by its honesty and power. Okay, so that's a musician. Next one up is a producer. And this is, I think, a person who is probably forgotten in Hollywood terms, which is a shame. I think died tragically young. But when this book came out, this was stirred up quite a bit of trouble at the time. It's a book called You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again by Julia Phillips. Julia Phillips was the first woman to win an Oscar as the producer of Best Film. She co-produced with her then husband Michael Phillips The Sting, which won Best Film in 1973, I believe. She later went on also, was one of the producers of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So a kind of important figure in the 70s. She co-produced, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, also co-produced Taxi Driver. So between The Sting, Taxi Driver, and Close Encounters, that's a pretty impressive CV, and an Oscar winner to boot. This book came out, I think, in the early 90s, so 20 years after her golden period, and is really gossipy. I mean, she says you'll never eat lunch in this town again because she spills the beans and talks about everyone she's come across. She had since divorced and moved on from Michael Phillips, but she talks about everything that happened. She talks about Spielberg awkwardly trying to snog her at some party. She drops the dime on everybody, and it's fabulous. And I read this in so this is a sort of a paperback, sort of mass market paperback I bought in the UK in 92. So this is after my first degree. I was studying at City University doing a journalism postgrad, and I think I picked this up in the City University bookstore just because I found, I'd finished my degree in literature, and it was the first time I was reading for pleasure, and a big movie fan. I thought, okay, I'm going to pick this up and whiz through this. And I think within 3 or 4 years she had sadly passed away from cancer, and as I said, probably a bit of a forgotten figure, despite the fact that she was a pioneering woman in Hollywood, certainly as far as the Oscars are concerned. So I don't know. I guess this book isn't in print, but if you can find an old copy and you have a love of that sort of era of cinema and the personalities, You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again by Julia Phillips. Okay, so the last one of the 10 that I'm starting with before I get to the 3 bonus books, don't forget, is a book by an actor. And I don't have this. I have this as a hardback. I think this is an original hardback book. And I'll show. Oh, that's terrible. That's come off. So this is from 1974, when I would have been 5 years old, which may explain some of the crayon marks inside it. I don't have the dust cover, which must be lost to memory. This is a book called The Last of the Really Great Wang Doodles by Julie Edwards. And it is a terrific fantasy book where a trio get dragged into a magical world. 1 second. Just so you know that it's a fantasy book with a magical world, there is a map, the province of Wang Doodle's palace, and say this is really a terrific story. There's my crayon marks on it. Now, open this up now, and it does have a sticker inside it saying, "This book belongs to," and that is my sister's name, which is rather embarrassing. Also, I love this in those days, when you bought books from independent bookshops, they stuck their own stickers on it. So this is from Book One Limited in Temple Fortune Parade in Finchley Road, which I believe was a children's bookshop. I have a faint memory, I could be wrong. In times when such a thing still existed, they had children's bookshops in London. That's an old 01 number, so before they changed all the numbers in London. So I think my mum must have picked this up for me. And I really had very, very fond memories of this, more drawing on the cover. I don't know who defaced this. Really, really very fond memories of this, more inside back cover. Someone's taken a pen to that. Perhaps the question you might be asking is, I said this was a book by an Oscar-winning actor, and you might be asking who Julie Edwards is. Although some of you, I'm sure, by this point know who Julie Edwards is. Julie Edwards is her married name. She was married to the director Blake Edwards, who famously directed Breakfast at Tiffany's and 10 with their Dudley Moore and Bo Derek. And he married a young actress called Julie Andrews. Her married name was Julie Edwards, but this is in fact by Julie Andrews, who won an Oscar in 1965 for her performance in Mary Poppins. Spitspot. And that is my 10 books by Oscar winners, but I have 3 more here that are really sort of, I guess, trivia questions as much as anything. So, and each one of these authors has won 1, 2, and then 3 Oscars. So the first one is one of only 2 people in history to have won both an Oscar and the Nobel Prize for Literature. Nobel Prize for Literature, Nobel Prize for Literature, and an Oscar. And I'll let you try and have a guess who the 2 are. Well, I'll show you this one. I don't have anything by the other person, who I have actually got a book on well, hopefully it's already in London waiting for me. But this is the second person to have won an Oscar and a Nobel Prize for Literature, and that is Bob Dylan. And his book of autobiography, which was Chronicles, Volume 1, he called it. We have yet to see Volume 2. And Dylan won an Oscar for his song from the movie Wonder Boys, called Things Have Changed. And Wonder Boys, of course, based on a book by Michael Chabon. And this is his autobiography chronicles. He wrote, I think, famously in the 60s, there's a book that he put out, which I haven't read, Tarantula, have I got that right? That's, those old sort of 60s. I used to see them in music fairs. They would have original 60s copies, paperbacks of Dylan's book, but this is the only one of his that I've read, and it's a terrific read. It darts about in time, so it's not a linear autobiography. I think he looks at 3 different periods of his life, and not even in order, but he's just such a witty and human writer, and very clear-eyed about things like, when everyone is talking about you as the voice of your generation, what does that feel like when you wake up in the morning and you read an article that says, oh, you're the voice of your generation? How do you go about making coffee and going to the supermarket and stuff when you're the voice of your generation? And I remember that very, very strongly. It's a terrific read. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of Dylan, like with Springsteen. I'm not a Dylan fanatic. I'm much more of a sort of Beatles guy. I've read lots of books about Beatles and listened to every album of theirs endlessly. Not the same with Dylan, but as a writer, this is a terrific work, recommended for anybody. So 1 Oscar for Bob Dylan, one of only 2 people to have won the Nobel Prize and an Oscar. The other, in case you're wondering, is George Bernard Shaw. I'll just leave that out there. Next one, also this is a totally unique situation here, but this author has won 2 Oscars and the only person ever to have won an Academy Award and the Booker Prize. Get your head around that. The Booker Prize for Best Novel and 2 Oscars. And that is, if you don't know, is Ruth Prawa-Jabvala. This is her novel that won the Booker Prize. This is Heat and Dust. It's the only book of hers that I've read. She won 2 Oscars. The first Oscar she won was for the screenplay to A Room with a View, based on E.M. Forster's book. And then she also won for Howard's End, also based on an E.M. Forster novel. I would say, I think probably a work of hers that influenced me as much as anything would be her screenplay to A Room with a View. It was one of the first, I'm 17 years old when I saw that in the cinema. We would go and see Ghostbusters or Back to the Future or whatever James Bond film was out at the time, and going to see A Room with a View, 17 years old, in a crowd, some girls that were trying to impress with our intellectual bona fides, and watching this thing which was not an action movie with no spies, no guns, nobody got blown up. But there is a rather marvellous kiss in a beautifully filmed Italian sunset. And I guess A Room with a View changed my world and changed my worldview as much as anything. And I think her screenplay is a big part of that. It's so funny, and all the acting is also beautiful, and the direction of the movie is fantastic. And this is her novel, which won the Booker Prize, which is Ruth Prawa-Jabvala, if you don't know, was a German Jewish lady who married a man called Cyrus Jabvala and moved to India, and I think spent a lot of time in India, which is how she got hooked up with Ismail Merchant, and then James Ivory is the American. That was the movie. Ismail Merchant was the producer, and Ivory director, and Ruth Prawa-Jabvala was the screenwriter, and they made a whole bunch of movies which defined that era, late 80s era of originally indie cinema, but very successful productions. This is a novel that she won Booker Prize in 1975. It's set in India, and is very much part of that era of books that were being published in the UK about colonialism in India. And after this, we get the rise of Salman Rushdie, etc. This was a fine read, but again, sadly lost to memory mostly for me. I bought this in that's August '93, so that's a long time since I read it. I picked this up. I must have been in Israel. I picked this up in a second-hand bookstore in Israel, and this is a lovely old English edition, which would originally sold for 60 pence. You can see there. Maybe it's something I should go back and visit. I think she's kind of fallen out of favour as a writer. I wonder if any of the others. I just thought Bob the Booker and Kieran at Katie Books, who talk and are reviewing old Booker Prize winners. I wonder if they've come across this and how it reads sort of 25, 30 years after I read it, which is already 20 years after it was a prize-winning novel. I'd be very interested to hear their thoughts on it. But that is the only person ever to have won the Booker Prize and an Academy Award, in this case 2 Academy Awards. And then the last book I have, 30 minutes, wow. The last book that I have for you today is something co-written, so not solely written, by somebody who has the rare distinction of being an EGOT. And those of you who are fans of 30 Rock or just movies in general, or showbiz in general, will understand that what the EGOT is. And the EGOT is the most prized goal and aspiration for anyone in showbiz, where you win an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. An Emmy is for TV, a Grammy for music, an Oscar for film, and a Tony for theatre. And there is a rarefied list of people who have EGOTs. So in this final choice, in the final bonus book in my Oscar-focused selection of authors, I have an EGOT winner. As I say, this is a co-writing production, and this is a rare reference book that you see on BookTube, but it's a reference book that I have read cover to cover. This is the Guinness Book of #1 Hits, and this is the second edition of this that I have. The first edition I have, which went through the first 500 number ones in the UK. This is number one in the pop charts in the UK. So it started in 1952 with Al Martino's Here in My Heart, and number 500, if I remember correctly, is A Little Piece by Nicole, which was the German entry for the Eurovision Song Contest that year. And I wore that copy out, reading every single word about the artists and the producers of those songs and their impact in the cultural times. And this is an updated edition. So this goes all the way up to, so that one stopped in 1982. That was the first 500, stopped in 1982. This goes up to 709, but only goes up to 1994. So this is already 26, 27 years old. And if you're interested, number 709th ever #1 hit in the UK was Love Is All Around by Wet, 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 as featured in Four Weddings and a Funeral, which was not an Oscar-winning movie, but Oscar-nominated, certainly, I think. Could be wrong. Anyway, Tim Rice is your man right here, listed as co-author, and he wrote a lot of books for, or co-wrote with Paul Gambaccini, who's an American DJ who's worked primarily in the UK for the last 30, 40 years and currently presents on Radio 4 a music quiz program called Counterpoint, which has just finished the season. It's terrific. And Jonathan Rice is Tim's brother. And there was also Mike Reed used to work on they did chart reference books where they would just list every single artist who'd ever had a hit on the charts and what number in the charts that hit reached the year it was released, and just a book of stats. I don't know what the obsession, nobody likes to talk about the differences between men and women, but I will say that the overwhelming majority of people I've come across in my life who are obsessed with stats are men, whether it's sport stats or chart stats or film stats. It's something about the way my brain is wired that I used to sit and pore over the Guinness Book of Hit Singles and the Guinness Book of Hit Albums and just memorize the names of songs, some of which I'd never heard, and what number they reached in the charts and who had how many #1 hits and how many top tens. This was a little more word. That was just stats. There was no very little words to that. This goes through every single #1 single with some description about what it was. So it's great if you just want to know what was #1 when you were born, or if you want to know a little bit more about who the song producer who had the most #1s in the 60s was. Clue. George Martin, and right up to my era, which was the 80s. And I say the first edition I had, this stopped in 1982, and this goes all the way through to the greatest year in popular music history, which is of course 1984, and beyond that. So this is a great work. And Tim Rice is an EGOT. He has won Emmys for primetime television Emmy. He won Grammys for his music, and he won an Oscar. He's won 3 Oscars. He's primarily a lyricist, and you might know of him usually paired with Andrew Lloyd Webber, although he's worked with other people, including Elton John, including Benny and Bjorn from ABBA. But he's won 3 Oscars, I think, or 2 in conjunction, I would say. Each one different. So the first one is he won an Oscar for the lyrics to A Whole New World, which I believe is working with Alan Menken as the musician. The second one was Can You Feel the Love Tonight from The Lion King, with as lyricist, and Elton John was the musician. And the third Oscar that he won was from You Must Love Me, which was the song written specially for the movie version of Evita, which he co-wrote with Andrew Lloyd Webber. So that is my last and final. Wow, if you watch 35 minutes of this, you are crazy, but thank you. So an EGOT to end as the co-author of a book. So that is my exhaustive list of books by people who have won Oscars. If you have other suggestions, and there must be someone out there who has got copies of David Niven, who I believe won an Oscar, copies of his best-selling books from the 70s, which I've never read, but I remember everyone, when I was like 6-7 years old, everyone was reading The Moon is a Balloon. But if you have a copy of The Moon is a Balloon, hold it up. I want to see a picture of it, and bring on the dancing horses, maybe. I should go back and read those David Niven books. They're supposed to be super fun. Anyway, any other Oscar winners who have written books, I don't care what kind of books, playwrights, and anything you've got by an Oscar winner, please let me know about it. I want to hear about it. Take care. Bye.